future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live from Monday, June 21st, 2021. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts from down the street and across the nation. On Friday, Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And Sean's been away, but he is coming back this week with all sorts of stories, I'm sure. And we want to check out also our newest addition to Raging Chicken's network of podcasts, The Wednesday Show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril is a progressive columnist from Bucks County Courier-Times and The Intelligencer. He joins me to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and international politics every Wednesday. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And you can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/RC Press. And you can help out the show right now by heading on over to YouTube if you're not there already. You make sure that you smash that subscribe button, like the stream of the show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. We're also broadcasting live on Riverside.fm. Yes, join us on Riverside.fm, and you can even call in towards the end of the show. Right? Pretty cool. You can also join our Discord server, look for information in today's show notes. You know, all sorts of stuff going on here at Raging Chicken. And for more PA-based progressive talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, or Facebook. And subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Go to ricksmithshow.com for all the latest across all his platforms. And you must check out the newly launched Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. Yes, the amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Spooky, right? Yep. Well, make sure to follow them on Twitter at the Night Caucus and subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And got to give that shout out for all those gamers out there. You check out the Game In. That's Game In with 2 N's in. It's a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, Funko Pops, action figures, you name it. And you kids, they made it through this pandemic year, and they got an A on their report card, boom, they get a discount right over there at the Game In. You got information about them, you want to go check them out on their Facebook page at the Game In. You follow them on Twitter at the Game In. And if you got a question for them, just shoot them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a special shout out once again goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan, again, 2 N's, at SongADayMan on Twitter. Well, on tonight's show, I am thrilled to welcome Erin Wallace to the program. We'll be talking about craft brewing's Me Too reckoning in the wake of a flood of stories about misogyny, racism, and sexual harassment and assault in the craft brewing industry. The catalyst for the latest round of stories follows an Instagram post by Brienne Allen, a production manager and brewer at Notch Brewing, which I'm sporting their T-shirt tonight, everybody.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I went back and forth with some of the folks there, and Brave Noise, they just released Brave Noise in support of Pink Boot Society, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So got to kind of represent the Notch folks there for showing support for Brienne coming out into this. And hundreds of women across the industry responded to her Instagram post about telling their experiences of sexism and harassment. The attention has led to the resignation of managers, owners, and several well-known breweries. Tired Hams, perhaps the most noteworthy locally, shortly after that Instagram posting went live. Erin Wallace is one of Philadelphia region's premier beer experts. She is the founder and longtime owner of the renowned beer-centric bar and restaurant, The Devil's Den, just south of Washington Avenue in South Philadelphia. Get your butts there, folks. Wallace is a fixture in Philadelphia's ever-growing beer scene. She's a self-taught beer connoisseur and has an extensive knowledge of local and imported craft beers. Former longtime board member of Philly Loves Beer and Philly Beer Week, Wallace is also the regional founder and co-leader of the Philadelphia chapter of the Pink Boot Society, an international nonprofit organization that supports women working in the brewing profession, especially in creating craft beer. Erin also attended Baltimore School of the Arts and Moore College of Art and Design in Philly. Her love for beer developed as her time as a server and bartender in various bars and restaurants in the city. She opened the Devil's Den in 2008. The Den is known for its excellent and diverse array of craft beers curated by Wallace, as well as a dynamic event schedule. She is noted as one of Philadelphia's top craft beer bar owners. The Devil's Den has won accolades from multiple publications, has appeared in Philadelphia Magazine and Foobooz Top 50 Bars list multiple times. Yes, Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, I tell you, I got to start with a little bit of a confession here, and my confession is that I have not been to the Devil's Den yet.
Well, you got to get down here.
So I'm just going to hang my head a little bit to get started here. But I have to say, before I knew that even like you were the owner or that, you were involved with Pink Boots or anything like this, I had friends from Philly who had always said, oh, you got to go to the Devil's Den. You always got to go to the Devil's Den. So
we got great food, great mussels, great beer, and cocktails too.
There you have it. Well, why don't we just start there? Why don't we start with the Devil's Den? Because it is, really, it's the kind of place where people say, have you been to the Devil's Den? You got to go there. So you founded the Devil's Den in 2008. Tell us just a little bit about the place and what got you there.
Yeah. So I originally I had a old school dive bar up in Manayunk. I had the Old Eagle Tavern for a few years. And why I loved the Old Eagle was a smaller spot. And we kept looking to expand and do some next steps. And it only made sense to go out of our neighborhood and go down south. And we happened to find a great location. And we kind of really turned it into a destination point for craft beer. We've served beer from all over the world. We've had breweries that were coming into Philly that we've been able to premiere their beers. And we're very gastropub. Our food is really made to go with the beer. It is food that is made to be drank with beer. We're big on mussels, duck fries. We run huge beer events. Always took part in Philly Beer Week, but I hosted a sour beer festival for years, which took a little pause kind of during COVID. But we always have something going on that's beer related. Beer's always kind of been the background. And for a while there, I actually owned a brewery as well.
Oh, did you?
Out in Lafayette Hill. Yeah, so I had Barron Hill Tavern and Brewery for about 5 years. And, we were kind of getting up and getting running, getting our feet under us when I decided to get divorced, so no more brewery. Something had to go.
Right, something had to go, right?
Yes. So, and then we kind of started downsizing, and right now I just have the Devil's Den, which has been, thank God, because during COVID, I don't think I could have handled multiple places at one time. This past year, it would have been way too much.
Well, and we talked a little bit about this before the show. I was, glad to hear that, that you all are still plugging through all this, because I know this has been a challenge for any industry, obviously, but in particular, any kind of service industry, food industry, where you've been kind of shut down and had to be extraordinarily creative in the midst of a time we just don't know what to expect from day to day.
Yeah. It's definitely trying to switch where we were 99% in-person business to switching to just doing takeout for a while, to only having 6 seats outside, to like the rules changing every other day, sometimes with like, 1 hour's notice, like tomorrow the rules change. Great. We don't even know what they are. And then right now just dealing with, being short-staffed and trying to get enough employees to cover the shifts that we have. So we can't expand hours because we don't have enough of staff right now, and just dealing with supply issues. The prices are going through the roof on certain items. You call one day and things you think you always have been able to buy every day for the past 20 years, now you can't get, and nobody knows when it's coming back. And then the next day you get more than you need. So it's definitely been it's led to some interesting struggles this year.
I could totally see that.
Yeah.
As someone who, I worked in, like I said before, I worked in the food industry for years and years and years, but never in, we've had and sometimes there were some pretty challenging times, but not like this. This has been something else. So, it's good to hear the Devil's Den is going to be there. So, selfishly, so I can get down there, right?
Yeah.
My wife
you
and
I come down and get an order duck fries.
Okay. All right. That's it. I'm done. All right, you got it. 100%. So, okay. So, a couple things here. I mean, I definitely, we're going to, focus the bulk of tonight's show, talk a little bit about, say the experiences. Well, first of all, some of the revelations that have happened after Brianne Allen's Instagram post and all the coverage that's come before that. But before we kind of get there, to step back a little bit, I mean, anybody who's, been kind of loosely associated with the craft beer industry. I mean by not just brewers in themselves who people have worked there, but even patrons in there. I mean, that there has been this tension always kind of in there, in that about, very kind of masculinist, right? Yeah. Very kind of like, kind of white boy network, very kind of a male dominated field. And yet, you've been around for a while now, right? I mean, you've been involved in this industry for quite some time. And becoming part, and now kind of as one of the co-leaders of the Pink Boots Society, right? Helping support other women in the industry. I'm curious about, that process for you, kind of coming up in this industry, kind of leading up to this point where, we're trying to reckon with this publicly.
Well, it was one of those ones, like I started in the industry as a server and a bartender when I was in college. And this whole sexism and harassment and abuse, it's been in the restaurant and the bar and the brewing industry. It's kind of been like the dirty little secret that nobody talked about. It's always been a very male dominated industry. I worked at one place where, they wouldn't let the women do certain things. The women were supposed to be behind the bar and serving and being pretty and dressed a certain way to be attractive to the male customers. Yep. And you're kind of expected to flirt a little bit. But it was, and you look at it a little bit of like, oh, well, that's because you're making money and you're making your tips off the customers and the customer's supposed to always be right and you're supposed to make them feel welcome. But at the same time, you always had customers who wouldn't take no for an answer. And then sometimes you had employees that were just, coworkers and all that were out of line. And I hit a point, I very early on where I was bartending for a few years at a place and then had the opportunity to go work the Old Eagle. So, and go and open that up. So I got to go in as management very early on and at a very young age and run my own place. And even as an owner, I've had employees make inappropriate comments. And at the time I was married and they knew my husband too. So it was, it's always been just this weird, but it's always kind of been this underlining thing. And for a while it was always like, you just need to toughen up. Those people are drinking. They're the customers, just toughen up and take it. And, and things sometimes progress when you don't tell, you can't you don't feel comfortable putting somebody in their place and telling them that's inappropriate behavior. And you don't feel like you're going to be backed up by management if you do that as well. I've had, and I don't know a woman who's worked in this industry that hasn't had something happen, whether it's small little comments made and inappropriate comments made or something that has led to inappropriate touching or even assault. I had somebody wait for me outside of the bar one night while we were closing up. And, I never felt uncomfortable enough to walk home, walk to my car because I was always parked within a block until then. Yeah. It's I had a manager at the time, be aggressive, and he was drinking on the job and married and was aggressive and pushed me up, and trying to touch and kiss. And then he went in the back room and passed out during his shift when I ran the entire shift by myself. It was just those kind of things. And it was always kind of like the thing that you didn't talk about because it's just what happened. And you were kind of told to man up and take it. And if you wanted to be in this business, you just had to brush it off and learn how to do it. And for a while there, you start going, well, if I can take it, then, and this new girl's starting and she's uncomfortable, she's got to learn how to just take it and handle it if she's going to be in this industry. So that's kind of always been the thing. It was just kind of take it, laugh it off, learn how to shrug it off and move on and get thick skin. And, now it's, I started realizing I read one of those reports, one of the things from Brianna, And I read that and I was like, that exact same similar thing happened to me about 20 years ago when I started in the business. And if it's still happening, like, we know this is wrong. We know this is not appropriate and this is wrong. And if it's still happening, why do we keep allowing it to happen? Why aren't we? But everybody just kind of brushed off as that's what happens in the industry. Toughen up and take it. And, you know, enough's enough. People shouldn't have to go through that to be in this industry.
100%. And I think that, you know, I don't know, like, what you think about this, but, you know, one of the things that, you know, I could imagine is being kind of extra difficult, well, a layer of difficulty, but also of possibility, like here. And I think is what we're seeing now, because, you know, craft beer has had this this ethos of community, right? Is that, you know, we're the small brewery that's rooted in the community. It's a place for coming out to meet. You know, I've said this multiple times on our podcast. I live in Percy. We got Free Will right here. And I've seen the changes that have happened just in the town where people have a place to gather, right? Who would not necessarily be running into place. And it has that sense of, you know, this is part of this community. But that's also, that's a double-edged sword. Like on the one hand, you have that opportunity there, but then it could also reinforce exactly some of the things that you were talking about. Well, we've got this great community, so we're just going to kind of shut up about this, and we're not, you know, just going to have to toughen up and move through. But I mean, have you found that being is just another extension of the food industry or is this something, you know, kind of specific to craft beer?
No, I think it's actually, you know, I mean, they said Sam Calagione from Dogfish Head is kind of like noted for saying that the beer industry, the craft beer industry is 99% asshole free. But he said that years and years ago when there were a lot less breweries and it was a smaller, tighter knit community. I think now as more and more places open and people are getting into it, like there's more there's more people. You know, I don't know if that can be, if it's true now.
Right.
I do still think that the majority of people are good people and they want to, you know, like the brewery owners want to run a good business and they want a place where everybody's happy and comfortable. You know, like nobody wants to have women harassed and abused, but I think sometimes they're willing to sweep it under the rug because they think it's an isolated offense, or some of these breweries are like, this isn't happening here. And then of course there's always that weird, you know, you're in a bar, you're in a brewery, there is drinking involved. And a lot of breweries, I mean, even in my case, when I was smaller, we didn't have a handbook starting out. It was like, okay, well, you had your rules. And then as you got a little bit bigger, you added more rules because then you started finding out, well, this is a problem and this is a problem. Well, if I have it written down, then there's no confusion over where I stand. And then as you grow, you start to realize you need a handbook, you need a set of rules, but everybody kind of, when they're smaller and, you know, you can't afford an HR department and you know, you're already spending all your money to just open up and you're in a lot of debt, you know, things slide. And then it's also what becomes more important sometimes when you're opening. It's like buying the equipment, getting the menu, getting open. You don't think, I should have a handbook before I even open the door so that my staff know where I stand on certain things and everybody knows what the rules are. It's usually something that comes down the road and usually after there's been an issue.
Right.
Because we operated for years without one, and as we got bigger and bigger and we, you know, and then the handbook has evolved. I mean, now I have a whole section in there about COVID, like what happens if somebody should get COVID. So it should change. It should change and evolve as things do. But I think that a lot of people, that becomes like a back burner thing because they don't think it's as important as the beer, the food, the recipe, you know, and sometimes they don't see the bigger picture in it.
Well, and I think, I mean, just as you said, I mean, we're at the point now where it's like, why are we putting up with it? And things like whether it's a handbook or kind of what we do about it is kind of right on the front burner now. I mean, if we go back now, look at, you know, then when Brianne Allen, you know, she put this out, I guess May 11th, I guess when she posted
God,
that.
It's been so long.
I know. I was looking at that today.
Exhausting.
But here's the remarkable thing, right? So I was just printing out some articles today because I still work in print, like get another confessional here tonight. But like, so for example, just 3 days ago, there's this big article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, right? Once again, it's like women brewers and saying, "Yep, here we go." Yes, that might have been May 11th that that we first had these revelations come out again. We saw the Instagram post, but now we hear just like 3 days ago another big kind of story come out and saying, "Look, this is not something that is going to go away." And it seems to me now that there is some momentum behind kind of women in the industry and their allies to saying enough is enough, right? And I mean, I'm curious kind of from where you sit kind of in this, because I like, just as even you describing your own kind of history in the industry, this is not the first time that these things have come up. This is not going to be the last time that it comes up. No. And it's not so simple as just saying, hey, look, oh, we did bad, now we got to move on and do better. But there's got to be some kind of significant change. So where do you see things right now?
I mean, it's interesting to me because, as women, we all talk amongst each other. So like, you hear all these stories. You have sales reps that get together and, and we're all, don't go around this one when he's been drinking, because, if you're going to sell your beer, go early when he hasn't been drinking. He gets a little handsy. He's going to get a little touchy. People are bad to work for. I mean, you always hear it. This one treats me poorly. This one makes inappropriate comments. Like, this one touches inappropriate. Right. So there's always been like a little circle where, I had a friend of mine come up to me and warn me. She was a sales rep, and she said she had worked with a couple different breweries, and she said to me at one point, I don't want you to ever be alone, like when you're out drinking, and if you're be wary of this guy, because he has made some comments to me about you that make me very uncomfortable. And she wouldn't even tell me what he said. She's like, but I worry about you drinking around him, and, because of what he said about you. And so we kind of always warned each other and talked to each other on the side of who you should probably keep an eye out and stay away from and things like that. But, you starting to see some stuff catch ground. A few years ago, there was a big story that came out in the Midwest of a woman who was raped by her boss. And, and you started to see it catch a little bit, and people start talking about it a little bit. There was a lot of victim blaming in that one. Like, how could she still work there afterwards? But, you can't always just quit your job.
Right.
She was a single mother. You can't just quit and not have money sometimes. She got out of there as soon as she could. But then it kind of died down a little bit. Like, everybody kind of got quiet, and then it died down a little bit. And then about a year or so ago, it kind of broke with Boulevard, or earlier this year, that there was an accusation about Boulevard and sexism, and somebody being kind of forced out of their job, not quite fired, but kind of forced out of their job for being pregnant, and a lot of inappropriate comments being made for that. And you started seeing people talk about it a little bit more, and a few more comments, and Boulevard took action right away. But it was the way they handled it that another person accused another Boulevard employee earlier of abuse and harassment, and it was instead of outwardly firing him, the guy had been with the company for a while, they let him retire, and slid him out of the company and covered it all up so that the company still had this good reputation, and they weren't damaging his reputation, that he could go get a job somewhere else. But it was always this kind of keep it under cover, keep it quiet. And then, and I think, and, you just keep hearing these stories, and they'd be little sparks of fire, and you just kept wondering when it was gonna catch. And then I remember hearing about Brianna's Instagram and going and seeing it. And, her original post, she didn't really expect this to happen. Her original post was she was at work, and somebody made some stupid microaggression comment.
Yeah, she was helping set up a beer line or something, right? She was setting it.
Do it, and a contractor, not even somebody at her brewery, a contractor made it, and I was like, man, I could tell you, I could count, like, I don't have enough fingers to count how many times I've had that happen to me. A plumber who came in who said, oh, I can't talk to the little old lady, she won't understand, like, I don't want to upset her, and then continued to have the conversation with my bar back, who was like 19 years old when I'm the one paying the bill. Like, or, you know, so like, I'm like, that stuff happens all the time. And so she posted it out there, and it kind of started with people sharing stories like that of how, like, they've been disrespected by, not knowing what beer is in the product. And, I mean, I could count on the number, it's the same thing, how many customers and people assume that I don't know beer because I'm a woman, or I drink the fruity drinks or the girly drinks, the cider, like, I'm not going to order the double I. Meanwhile, usually the men are the ones at the bar drinking the fruity beers, but they call them the girly drinks, you know? Right. That was when I always loved to stop at the bar where they're like, we'll have the girly beer. And I was like, what beer is that? And they're like, oh, Space Monkey by Fegley's Brew Works. It's a raspberry saison. And I said to the guy, I said, do you see there's 3 women sitting at this bar right now? Not one of them's like, and there's 5 people drinking it, and they're all men. Yeah. The women are drinking the double IPAs, like, stop. And then I had a guy order, like, they're like, we'll have girly drinks. And so I walked over with a bottle of tequila and a bottle of Jameson and asked them what they wanted a shot of. And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, this is what me and my girls drink, so I'm assuming that's what you want. That's what you mean, like, right? A shot of Jameson, right? And no, they wanted amaretto sours. So, it's always like, it starts out with those little things. And then if they don't get put in their plate, and then, other ones, guys that think because you're behind the bar, you're there to be their date, and they continue to hit on you or make inappropriate comments and treat you pretty poorly. And then it's the thing, if nobody stops it and puts them in their place and tell them that's wrong, it continues. And then the next time they're going to feel a little bit better, and maybe they're going to touch somebody, and then maybe they're going to do, and it just keeps going if they're never put in check and told that this is wrong. And I was watching those stories on Brianna, and it started as these little, like, microaggression stories of, oh, well, I hate it when I'm at a beer festival and customers don't think that I know anything about beer when I make the beer. Or they think, or I talked to a contractor who said that, and then it started growing to, like, well, then this one touched me, and then the stories were pretty horrendous and horrible. They were accusations of rape and, assault, like multiple accounts of assault, physical, sexual, like, there's a known story of a guy who used to own a brewery in Florida who beat his girlfriend, and and everybody knew about it. And he's now hired working for a different brewery in a different state now. And all you have to do is a search of his name, and you'll find out what he did in his past. Did he pay his time and do his, for his crime? I don't know, but is he,
Well, but that's the thing, right? Because one of the things that I was struck by when reading those, and I certainly have not read everything that's on there. It is just daily. The stories are just, like you said, I had the same experience watching, like, reading some of them, being like, yeah, I remember this from being in the fast food industry, or not fast food, but in the food industry, hearing some of this stuff in the bars and all stuff. But what starts to accumulate, you start, they have to be put in their place, right? And then there's got to be, the way I guess I look at, I grew up Catholic, right? So I grew up Catholic, and I know the power of shame and guilt, right? So, like, and the idea that there's got to be some sort of public cost, right? Where that it's not simply just on the responsibility of, say, like an owner like you or one individual to say no. Of course, that is the responsibility to say no, stop that stuff, or get the hell out of the bar, right? But it's also saying that other people in that pub, right? Other people who are going to these places need to say, wait, that behavior is unacceptable, and not wanting to even put up with that in terms of the community. And it seems like, seeing some of the responses, even, again, some people have been very critical about the breweries who start putting out beers in support of Pink Boots Society and things like this. To say some of them are using it as a PR opportunity, but other breweries are really, seems like they're stepping up, right? And basically, like in Notch Brewery, right? They came out and said, look, we're supportive of what she's saying, right? And she's come out and said, look, I've got nothing but support from this, this place. And start to see this in industry by industry. There was great articles in the Inquirer about kind of Naked Brewery, right? Looking at kind of the women, kind of the owners and brewers that are responsible there. And this brewery, this article I mentioned from the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, where you have these kind of women brewers and owners finally kind of getting put in the kind of the forefront and kind of beginning to kind of like operate, as a collective, and saying we as a whole now are not going to put up with this. And that seems to be a significant shift from where you're kind of having to kind of do like almost like hand-to-hand combat on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, and that was the thing. It's like before all this, okay, so the Brewers Association had if you knew about it, they had a place you could go file a complaint. But one, I'm going to say for Brewers Association, like the breweries pay to be a member. Not everybody has access to the resources that the Brewers Association has. It's whoever from that brewery wants to share that membership. So the average employee on the ground, like, is not going to know what the Brewers Association, because they're members by breweries, and it's whoever has that login. And also the average person who is working in the brewery is not going to know that there was a complaint file that somebody could file with the Brewers Association. The other thing is you have to be a member of the Brewers Association for them to do something. Like, if you apply, like if you file a complaint and that brewery you're complaining about is not a member of the Brewers Association, like, what are they going to do? Like, what is, and I guess that's the big thing. It's like, what are the consequences? Like, they will stop you from entering in beers in the, they'll kick you out as a member. You can't enter in beers in the GABF. But if you're not a member, what are the consequences?
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing. Pink Boots has always had a code of conduct for our board members, along with our members, that we all read and agree to when we become a member. If we do not follow the and people can say, I'm, put a, I guess, a complaint in against me saying I'm not following the code of conduct, and they'll investigate it. And if they see that, they can kick me out for membership. But it's like, if you're not a member, then what happens? And that's the same thing. If you're the Brewers Guild of Pennsylvania, but you have plenty of breweries that aren't part of that, where do you go next?
Right.
And that's the thing. There's been no, like, here, it's not very clear that if a person has an issue and there's a problem, where do they go next? I know plenty of women who have followed complaints at work, who've done it properly, who have emails and all, but if it goes up and they're not doing anything about it, then what's the next step?
Absolutely.
And it's looking for new work. For them, it's been looking for new work or trying to find somewhere else to go that's a better fit for them. Because in some places too, what happens when the owner's the one that's harassing you or bothering you? Then what do you do? So it's been a lot of, like, we've been online researching, like, places that statewide that people can file complaints. There's now lawyers that are coming forward who are willing to take on complaints, and it's, resources are coming in that we're able to share. One of the things that it's been worked on now is that they are forming a lot of the people in the industry. So Pink Boots Society, the Brewers Association, there's an HR company that works with breweries. And then it's like the Master Brewers Association, which are more of like the science. And there's a Master Chemist Association. It's like 5 different brewery guilds that cover different aspects of the brewing. They are all forming together to form a coalition. And they're going to start if somebody has a complaint, they file it with them. There'll be a time period for them to look into it and that way, if you're found guilty, it's not just going to affect you at one place, it's going to affect you at all 5. so that, it's kind of being the whole industry getting together to work together instead of just like the Brewers Association kicking you out of the Brewers Association. Right. If you're found guilty of this, it'll hold through, and carry through the entire industry through a group of organizations.
Well, and it seems like with that kind of organization and power, and with, I would say kind of like the grassroots push, right, by women in the industry, is that there seems to be like we're at a point where, this kind of organization and pressure and advocacy can really, really be effective. So in addition to these places where we can go and say file complaints, then there's also the opportunity to taking some of the things that I've been seeing, like taking those stories of saying, we know that this particular distributor or this particular thing has a track record, right, of being like horrific. Right. I mean, the beer industry is, yes, it's big, but it's small enough where that can be pretty substantial if people collectively say, we're not going to deal with your company. Right.
And there's been a thing. It's like, is cancel culture the best course of action? Because, I've spoken to some of the employees at Tired Hands recently, and it's like, I feel for them. Like, they're not an easy place. They're been in a very tough position. But it's, I don't know. I don't, like, obviously I've heard about how, Gene and some of the people treated people in general, not just women. They treated a lot of people kind of poorly. And so I was never one who went there. I chose not to spend my money there. And I never really did. So, because I saw it firsthand, and it was just like, I kind of am one that's like, well, if I don't want to give my money to that, I'd rather spend my money somewhere else. And, but I don't know if cancel culture will be the right answer for this. I think there's got to be some way that people can prove that they're, if they realize they're making a mistake and doing wrong, and that's questionable, like, is it just, are they saying it to say it and placate people, or do they actually mean it? And then what are the steps that they need to take to show that they're making a change?
Right.
And I don't know if I...
Yeah, and I think, no, I hear what you're saying, because like, this is the, I think, especially in an industry that is built so much around, say, the sense of community, right? And I even just reading some of the, the back and forth with the employees at Tired Hand, and the ways that they were grappling with, okay, what is it that we do at this point, right? Because, they're the folks who work there, who actually say make the beer, right? The staff members who are, work in the kitchen, work in the brewery, that serve the folks that are there. The vast majority of them haven't been on the, on the perpetrator side of things, right? They've been kind of the ones who make it run. They actually believe in the product and things like this. And so I thought what was interesting, what they did there, is that they kind of got together collectively, right? And kind of made a claim, made a move, kind of collectively say, we don't want to kind of sink this place, right? But we want this to stop. We want this to change. And then, so we have to have this space where we're going to be guaranteed a certain kind of accountability. I mean, and I look at it, look, I teach at Kutztown University, right? And I've seen instances again and again and again where you have, verifiable instance of harassment and abuse that are taking place against students, against other faculty members, and many of those times that the people who are doing are the people that are in power. And I've watched them get letters of recommendations to go on and get a nice job someplace else just to get rid of them at that one location. And so now it's somebody else's problem. And guess what? You follow them and you find out they do exactly the same thing at that next place. And so
because they don't stop if they don't, there's no consequences. They don't stop.
Exactly. And what my concern at this point, and it's been interesting seeing some of the the back and forth with people trying to grappling with kind of how we actually handle this, is that how do we ensure that we're not just going to be passing the buck? If the goal is to stop this, say, toxic culture, and again, it doesn't mean that everything in it is toxic. Let's be clear about that. But that part has got to stop. There's got to be some way that we're making sure that we're not just passing the buck. And I think, that's the uneasiness I feel in a lot of the discussions is like, well, what do we do about this in a way that we know that it's going to be accountable? It's not just going to be kind of hidden and going away, that they're not going to be able to put just a big happy face on things and saying, yeah, we'll take care of it. And meanwhile, the kind of abuse continues.
Yeah. And it's a good question. That's something, one of the things we found out is it's not very easy to have resources to tell people where to go, and what are next steps. And then, I know a few women who felt uncomfortable that still haven't come forward about harassment and abuse issues at their places because they said there's no support afterwards. That like when they come out, there's no support for them, like, having to relive all that as well. And so they have chosen not to speak out, and it's been a very interesting, reading. I read every single one of those posts that Brianne did.
Wow.
And somebody asked me why. I know a lot of people who couldn't read a few of them, but I read every single one because I said these women want to be heard. They've been holding this in for so long, and they now finally found a place that they could share, and they want to tell their story, and they want to be heard. I shared some stories on there, and then I chose to share, my story pretty publicly online because I started thinking about it, and in my past, realizing too, like, we all make these mistakes. I like growing up and always being in this industry of like, you have to be harder and stuff like that. I was in a very abusive relationship with my ex, who I was married to at the time. And he was very abusive towards me and the staff. And when he would be in the restaurants, he was a horrible alcoholic and drank a lot, and he would treat me poorly and totally be abusive towards me, but then on top of it be abusive towards the staff. And I was finally strong enough to leave him, which got him out of the restaurants. But my staff, like, where do they go? Who do they complain to? Like, they see me getting, verbally and harassed and beaten up by my husband. Like, they're not going to come to me to complain to me about him with what he was doing to them. So it's like, where do they go? And a lot of them stood by me during that time. And when I was strong enough that I was able to leave him, it got him out of that out of the place too for my staff. But I realized, like, I put a lot of them in a really bad work environment that they shouldn't have had to put up with. That wasn't right. And, I realized that I consider myself an advocate for women in the industry. And I looked at it and I said, how can I do how can I be an advocate now? There's all these women who's hurting and all. And for me, it was, I know there are a lot of women that can't tell their story right now, that don't feel like they're supported. They can't tell it. So then I can't tell their story for them. That's their story. They need to be able to tell it. But then let me tell my story and share that, and share like how this happens and how, and fight for there to be change. Because they're like, we can't continue, like, when I'm reading these stories and I'm going, that exact same thing happened to me 20 years ago. We know this isn't right. Like, a lot of people aren't going to want to call the cops on their managers, right, and all, and be exactly. Like, he was drinking and touched me while we were at work. Like, they're not going to do that. So it's like, how do we put an end to this? And I'm very grateful. There was one story that I read that was what triggered me to kind of stand up for what I believe in. Was I read one and I was like, that same thing happened to me 20 years ago, and this just isn't right. And that woman reached out to me, and then I shared my story online about my ex, and I stepped down from the board of Philly Beer Week because we had a few men that were accused of harassment and bad behavior that were on the board. And I felt that I could not continue to be on the board next to men that were like, how could I consider myself an advocate and a voice for women and trying to be a strong woman and sit next to people that have been accused of these things? Right. And so that's when I publicly decided to share my story and step down. And it was true. It's like the next day, I like you sit there and you're going, oh, you feel kind of horrible, like putting it all out there. And you know, I had quite a few ex-employees reach out to me that used to work for me at various times who were around when my ex was around, which was great. But I also had a woman whose story that I read on Brianna that I did not know, who heard about what I said and found me on social media and told me how thankful she was that somebody was willing to stand up and say this isn't right. And so that's where I'm figuring my if there are people who can't right now, and I've been in that position where I understand. Honestly, I could never have talked about what happened with my ex if it wasn't for the fact that he passed away recently, because I would still be scared of him finding out of what I've said.
Yeah.
Now I'm, nervous that his family will, but I'm definitely not as nervous as I would be if he had found out. So I've kind of have the freedom to be able to tell my story now that I didn't of about a year, within the last year, like I couldn't have recently. So like now being able to do that, I feel like that's my chance to help people be able to tell my story, be the one that can stand up when the other ones can't yet.
Well, and I mean, it was incredible. Like I said this to you before the show too. I mean, I kind of read your posting online, and it was, it was gut wrenching. I mean, and I've had my whole life, I've had, friends, women friends, family members, and things like this who have gone through this. So I'm kind of well aware of it, and it's just got to stop.
Yeah.
And the stories, I think, I mean, this has been true through kind of any kind of social movement, through the feminist movement, through any kind of supportive advocacy movement at any particular time. It's the stories, it always seems to be what, the collections of stories together and the solidarity kind of among folks and finding creative ways to kind of change the culture. At the same time, with this, with the moves that you're talking about here about, the consolidation of, the brewing industry, the different organizations to make sure that we're going to take a concerted effort. And it seems to me that, it's a moment of reckoning, I think, also for just even fans of the craft brew industry. Mm-hmm. And I remember, here on Out to Coop Live, or on our Friday show, the last section, we call it Last Call, right? And it's kind of like beer and space news, right? It's just like goofy stuff, kind of like to round out the show. And I'm here with Free Will. Sean Kitchen, my co-host, he used to work when he first moved out to Harrisburg. He used to work at Pizza Boy. Okay. And Colleen Wynn, who we had her on the show last week, she's out in kind of Harrisburg, founder of Harrisburg Beer Week. And we start talking about this kind of industry, and then as things become closer and closer to kind of an impact on it, we're talking about the revelations now. I remember in the aftermath of what happened after the George Floyd shootings. I mean, I remember having this moment of after one of our local hairdresser, like barbers, like in the area, his response to the George Floyd shootings and the protest was to post a picture of himself with like AK-47s and weapons in his store saying, "I dare you," basically. Right. And so I'm not going there anymore. Right. Yeah. But I had this moment of like, shit, what's going to be the response of Free Will? And I was like relieved. I was like so proud to kind of see, like, within days, right, them kind of posting this kind of solidarity move saying, look, we gave this a lot of thought, and we generally try to stay out of politics and kind of any of this stuff, but we cannot kind of stand by as, members of our community are hurting, right? So therefore we stand in support. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was like tremendous. And I think that kind of reflection now is going to be that much more important, even if we think about, where do I want to go? I've been reaching out, for example, doing searches for like, well, what are some of the kind of women-owned breweries in the area, right? And do they deliver? Because, like literally, places in the area, like in Philly, like, and obviously you're a place in Devil's Den, and organizations that we could help and support and stuff. So I mean, if you have, like, say, women in the industry at this point, within say the Philadelphia area or so on, and they're looking for kind of just like kind of contacts with people and places to go where that they can actually kind of connect up and looking to get involved to help change this, where can they go?
I would definitely recommend them reaching out to us at Pink Boots. And then we have a chapter email. It's pbsphiladelphia@pinkbootssociety.org. I've been working on putting together a list of resources with a few other women in the industry. So we have a list of resources we are putting together for women who have been harassed and abused, and where they can get help, whether it is, through Women Organized Against Rape, for like mental or, physical, or even, lawyer, like some lawyer help, if they want to press charges or look into what options are, but even if for therapy sessions and things like that. We're also putting together a list of resources, and we have a list. It's some local and some national, for organizations and businesses, for like, where do they go to find, like, what should their harassment policies be, and how should they handle if somebody needs to report it, because it's not always so easy to go and report some of these situations. So it's like, what are some ways that you can, so not everybody can hire a third-party HR company. Like, you can't. So there are now apps that you can purchase and use so that there's anonymous reporting, and it keeps it anonymous. And I've heard, very happy to hear that one of the women I know, recently, went to her boss and reported something that had been happening to her at work, and that, some of the breweries are taking notice, and they took her report, they spoke to other people, and they handled a situation that hadn't gotten bad yet, but would have gotten bad, and handle it very well. Like, so there are people out there trying to do it right. And I think a lot of times everybody wants to, it's just that they don't have the resources or know exactly what to have. Because a lot of brewery owners, we're entrepreneurs. We didn't come up, we're trying to run our own business. Like, we don't always come with backgrounds from business school. We don't know how to write a handbook. None of us are lawyers. So I've been trying to pull whatever resources we can find. We are, for Pink Boots, Women Organized Against Rape, which is war in the city. They're Philadelphia based. They offer a program called Safe Bar Training, where they train your staff to recognize, harassment and abuse that's happening. The idea is that it's happening to customers a little bit more so, but the talk can lead towards it being in the industry and coworkers as well. And what are good bystander intervention ways that, like, it's all about keeping your staff safe and the guests safe as well. So we're working with them to offer that to some of our members, and hopefully then be able to expand that to non-members as well. But we're getting starting with our members. And, we're looking to get I've been reaching out to a couple organizations to maybe have them come in and start offering some classes and workshops on, how to build a proper handbook, and how to build the proper resources for, how to report an incident, things, and what are next steps if you do report an incident, for both the people being harassed and a business. Because if, sometimes we just don't honestly know. And I don't think a lot of it is done intentionally, but, we're trying to find a way to use the resources that we have as Pink Boots. We do a lot of fundraising. It's used for educational purposes. And if this is educational,
Right.
so we, and that would be the one thing I would say, what you said about free will. They said they don't want to get into politics. This isn't political. This is not a political situation. This has nothing to do with who's going to be running president or anything like that. And that is something we've, Pink Boots, we're a nonprofit, so we've always tried to stay out of politics, but this is not politics. So we're, trying to use, our mission's always been to assist, aspire, and help women get knowledge and through education in the industry. So we're going to use the funds that our chapter, some of the funds that our chapter raised, we use for scholarships for women to go to brewing school and, hop classes and yeast classes and conferences. So now we're going to use some of that money to host some workshops that, breweries in the area can hopefully take advantage of. And make some nice next steps.
100%. Well, and I'll tell you, it's funny. I just said to somebody last week when, I was mentioning this, having you on the show, and I had Colleen Gray Nguyen who came on and said, "Oh, I didn't even know she was one of the co-founders of Harrisburg Beer Week and blah blah." And they said to me, "Yeah, all this stuff is like, it's all kind of political. It's all these kind of like liberals." I'm like, how is making sure and this person's like daughter either does work or used to work right in a brewery, right? Yeah. And I was like, how is protecting your daughter from not being harassed like about Democrats or Republicans? I'm like, dude, this is just a baseline here. Let's see. I mean, come on, like, can we just like not do this right now? I mean, and this is a person who like knows my politics, knows that I come out of the left, but I'm like, this is not that issue, right? This is not this. This is making sure that these people that I see on a daily basis, right, are being treated like equals, and that we're not going to allow abuse to happen in our community. I mean, that's all we're talking about here.
I mean, I said to somebody one time, they said, this has been the dirty secret. Everybody knows about that. They've heard about this one or that one. And I said, if you had a daughter and she worked, would you want her to be your salesperson and go make calls on that person? Like, you're like, oh, it's okay if it happens to it happens. It's just okay. Like, you've heard the rumors and you're just all right with it. But like, if you had a daughter, would you want them making sales calls to that person if this is how they behave? Like, exactly. It's time to start treating everybody fairly. And, we're working in a male-dominated industry. It doesn't, we shouldn't have to. Yeah, and then that's the big thing. A lot of people think, oh, pink boots. I mean, everybody thinks pink, and it's really girly, and it's like, it's been the whole conversation of like, do you want to be seen as like labeling yourself more as a woman and all in a male-dominated industry when you just want to be seen as an owner or brewer and not a female owner or a female brewer? But you know what? We are.
Right.
Like, we are. So, maybe it's about showing that what we can do. And, when I started in the industry, there were very few. You saw Carol Stout, Terry from London Grill, but there were, 99% men and 1% female. And I had very few people that I, female-wise, to look up to. And then now there's more. And every year there's more and more. And, and that's one of the things about Pink Boots. It's about showing that, a woman can do this job. We are doing this job and now create a space where more women can come in and do the job. And it's when you see it more and it becomes more of an everyday thing instead of like, oh, wow, a woman owns a bar, a woman brews beer. Like, I didn't know that. Like, what's one of the reasons when we held the Bold Women in Beer Festival, we always wanted women who worked at the brewery behind the tables so that when you came up to get your beer, it was being served by somebody who worked in the brewery. And majority of them were brewers, a few sales reps, a few owners, but we had them because we wanted it to become a thing that you saw that becomes every day. And then it stops becoming that, like, you're a female brewer or a female owner. It's just you're the owner.
100%. Well, thank you so much. Well, listen, Erin, I appreciate you taking time tonight. I've been thrilled and been looking forward to talking to you. Ever since this broke, and I want everybody make sure that this summer, because especially in like as COVID restrictions begin opening up, make sure to get your butts down to Devil's Den. I have to kind of I have to make my journey, and I am one, right? I'm with you, and if you haven't been there, and I'm going to make sure to get a point to get down there this summer, I would also be remiss if I didn't ask you this before we take off, is like if you had a good beer recommendation for the summer days ahead of us. It doesn't even need to be a specific brewery or brand, but anything particular that you could just would love it right now. You would kind of say this would be your go-to at this point.
It's funny, I've been going back to classic. I've been drinking a lot more Pilsners and lagers, a lot of lighter stuff, but I've been going back to classics lately, like Saison de Pont, it's great beer. And I think it's like we're always going out for whatever's new. And that one, every time I have it, I go, this is why this is the best. And why everybody tries to be like a Saison. And then what did I have recently? It was like Omegang Rosetta. Like, just, I love a good sour beer.
Yeah.
And during the summer, but yeah, I've been kind of going back a little bit more to the classics for me.
It's funny,
Yeah.
I had one of my favorite. I had some of my favorite beers for a long time were Czech beers. Right.
Mhm.
I mean, like back in the day before we had the real kind of explosion of all this, and it just out of a coincidence when all the stuff broke with Notch and everything, started looking at some of the stuff they do. That's one of their specialties. So I'm like,
yeah, I mean, if I'm going to a brewery now, I'm tending to go towards the lagers, the pilsners. I'll get a sour, but I'll usually just get one because sometimes they get a little too much. But I'm usually going more for the lagers or the pilsners right now. But I'll tell you, like, or if somebody's got a good saison, like, I'll drink that all day long. We actually, the one beer that I had multiple times in one sitting, Pink Boots went up and we brewed a beer with Iron Hill. This year we brewed Girls Just Want a Saison. And it was a saison dry hopped with our Pink Boots hop blend. Made by Avery, who is one of our Pink Boots scholarship winners. And I didn't get up there for the release of the party because it was a Friday. For the release of the beer, it was like a Friday night. But I got a chance to go because they were serving it at all the Iron Hills, and I got a chance to go to the one in Phoenixville and sit down. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have one. And then I ended up drinking it all night and grabbing a growler to go. And I never buy growlers anywhere anymore. And I was like, I want a growler of this. And I was like, so we took it home and had it all like the next night too. It was really good. But yeah, I'm a sucker for really good saison.
Well, there you go. Take it from the expert right there, Erin Wallace, everybody. Erin, I appreciate you taking the time tonight. And we're going to put information on how to get in touch with Pink Boots in the show notes. And do reach out. And this is just a message, just kind of on the other side of the bar, as it were. Like, so our patrons are there, men and women alike, right? We've got our responsibility too, right? And I don't mean it has to be kind of, like warrior mentality, but the idea is that, someone is going to be behaving inappropriately, right? It's okay to tell them to stop, right?
Yeah.
And
if you see something, say something.
Exactly, 100%. Well, Erin, I wish you all the best as this kind of like post-COVID summer just kind of gets rolling. And I'll let you know when I'm coming down, and
awesome.
hope you'll be able to say hello.
Order duck fries for you.
Fantastic. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in tonight. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Want to remind you once again, you can help support this show by becoming a patron by just go to patreon.com/rcpress. And a little bit later in the summer, I should mention this, we're going to have one of the head brewers of Narragansett Brewery kind of come on there, and she's going to be coming on. She happens to be kind of the partner of one of my best friends from college. And she'll be kind of coming on talking about, again, some of these issues, but also some labor issues and the thing like this. So we're going to kind of keep some of these themes that are kind of coming on, and we're going to stay on this one throughout the summer too as well. So Erin, have a great summer, and everybody, keep on tuning in. Hopefully we'll see you on Wednesday for the Wednesday show with Cyril Michaleko. We're going to be talking about his latest column that's going to be looking at some of the fact that PA still allows conversion therapy. All right, kind of like and law. We're going to talk about his latest column there and some of the things that he's looking at ahead and some of the profiles of progressives in Pennsylvania. But until then, I look forward to seeing you all around, and we'll see you this Wednesday for that show, and we will see you on a Friday for Sean's glorious return, and we'll be talking about his National Lampoon's family vacation across the country. So, see ya!